is a statewide multi-faith issue advocacy organization that puts faith into action on a variety of social, economic, and climate justice issues. So what that means is that we are an organization of people of faith and communities of faith that work to bring a moral voice to public policy in Kansas. And we work on 4 overarching areas. So Dr. King had what he called the 3 evils, which were racism, poverty, and militarism. And we have 4 evils because of inflation. Racism, discrimination, economic injustice, violence, primarily gun violence, and climate disruption. So anything that comes up in the state legislature that has to do with one of those areas, we will get involved with. Usually as a part of a coalition, working on the issue as the faith voice of the coalition. And so that's why we try to organize in and through communities of faith to have an impact on these issues. So I'm going to go through them again and give you some more detail. So racism / discrimination is something that, not only have we not really reckoned with it, but we still have a lot of systems of inequity in our society. Particularly, 2 areas that we've worked on a lot is criminal justice reform. Criminal justice reform because of this is a racism issue, because of the disproportionate number of black and brown people in our prison system. So that's an example of something that we've worked on. We also work on fair and just treatment of immigrants is another example. Economic injustice or poverty. This is an area that we don't talk about that much, but many people are in a state of precariousness about their economic situation. Only 1 or 2 emergencies away from really poverty. There's a huge amount of medical bankruptcies in this country, and the cost of medical care is a particularly big issue. And the issue that we worked on the most in this area is Medicaid expansion, which, if you pay attention to Kansas politics, has been going on for the last several years. This is something that we've worked extensively on. We almost got it this last year, and we believe that we'll be able to make progress on it in the 2020 legislative session. And also a supportive, used to be called social safety net, but we call it work supports that help people make the transition from poverty to self-sufficiency. Gun violence is the 3rd one. This has gotten a lot worse over the past 10 or 20 years, where there used to be kind of some agreements about where guns were and weren't appropriate. Now we've seen the inability, or there's an inability to regulate guns in any way. We've been working on this over the course of the last several years. There are steps that we can take that would address the prevalence of guns in society without negating anyone's rights. These would include universal background checks, red flag laws, limits on magazines, limits on assault weapons, licensing and training. These are sensible steps that we can take to address what is becoming a very serious issue, both in terms of gun violence against others and suicides. And the 4th area that we work on is climate disruption. So this is one that I really believe we could use the language of sin most appropriately. Both in terms of the fact that God has told us to be stewards of creation, and we're not doing a very good job of it, but also the fact that we've had 30 years of warnings about climate disruption, and we haven't taken the actions that would effectively address it. And I'll just say, I don't know if this ever is said to you in this setting, but it's real, we're causing it, there's things we can do about it, and we need to get started. I'm just going to say that again. Climate disruption is real, we are causing it, there's things we can do about it, and we need to get started. And one way, I'll just give you something to look up later. One way we're addressing it in Kansas, or starting to address it in Kansas, is through what we're calling the Climate and Health Declaration. So we're looking at impacts of climate on public health. So that would be extended mosquito seasons, diseases, heat events when 100-degree days go up, water and flood and drought, particulate matter through wildfires. So there's a document online at resilientkansas.org called the Climate and Health Declaration. We're expressing concern about the impacts of climate change on public health. So go take a look at that. We're asking for individuals and church members and other organizations to sign it. So go take a look at that, resilientkansas.org. Now these are all interrelated, which is why we talk about them sort of consecutively. In a situation, so an example that I always use is a couple of years ago there was a terrible hurricane in Houston. So you have a working person, a working family, works very hard, makes a little bit of a advance in the American dream. You know, a hurricane comes, wipes them out. A climate-charged hurricane comes and wipes them out. And then if they don't have flood insurance, they're basically back to square one. You know, recently we had Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas, another climate-charged superstorm destroyed the island, and we prevent refugees from coming here due to racial reasons, basically. The immigration issue, globalization undercuts farmers, subsistence farmers in Central America. Our mischief with their governments undercuts stability. They, in response to all that, they try to come here, and we greet them with militarized responses or criminalized responses. So these are all interrelated. You know, we have to look at what we bring to the situation before we start blaming people for what they're doing. And the way that we deal with these issues, these many different issues, is by building a movement of people of faith and of communities of faith that work to change public policy on these areas. So we call that advocacy. So where mission work is focused on addressing people's wounds, salving people's wounds, advocacy looks for the causes of those wounds and tries to address root causes. Where mission work cleans up the river, advocacy looks back up the river to see why it's polluted in the first place and tries to address root causes. All of these are important, but advocacy has been underutilized, particularly in communities of faith. But I really think of advocacy as being the third leg of faith development. So the first one is personal spiritual development, or in the Christian framing, salvation, right, saving of souls. The second one is mission work, which I've mentioned extensively, which churches do really, really well. This church has a pantry, which is fantastic. And the third one is advocacy, which is, again, looking back up the river to see why things are important and why things are happening this way. And I want to say, I bring a quote, which I'm going to read. This is from an ELCA social teaching document called The Church and Society, a Lutheran Perspective. As a prophetic presence, this church has the obligation to name and denounce the idols before which people bow, to identify the power of sin present in social structures, and to advocate in hope with poor and powerless people. When religious or secular structures, ideologies, or authorities claim to be absolute, this church says we must obey God rather than any human authority. With Martin Luther, this church understands that to rebuke those in authority through God's word spoken publicly, boldly, and honestly is not seditious, but a praiseworthy, nobly, and particularly great service to God. So why do we organize through communities of faith? There's three reasons, basically. One is that we have a long tradition of teachings and texts that tell us that God is concerned about the poor and that we're responsible to help the poor. The books mean what they say, and we are attempting to put those teachings into the public sphere through our organizing work. The second reason is that churches have an important moral role in their communities. When a pastor or a social justice committee says something about an important issue, that means something to people. There's an important moral role that churches play. And the third one is that churches are in the business of building connections between people and among people. That's something that's really been picked apart. I mean, over the last 30 years, churches have gone down in attendance, but so have unions and so have civic societies. But churches are really in the business of building connections between people, and that's something that we've lost a lot of. So churches model that in a really important way. Whether that is bringing a covered dish to a funeral, to a mourning house, or whether it's standing together for Medicaid expansion. And all of that is why the Central State Synod of the ELCA has entered into a partnership with Kansas Interfaith Action. As of March of this year, we are considered a state public policy office of the ELCA. So we are the official public policy office of the Synod, which means that I am a Lutheran public policy official. I'll say that I think it's important for you to hear that everything that I've said so far, and everything that we say publicly, and every testimony that we give is completely in keeping with the teachings of the ELCA. There's nothing that I've said, and nothing that I probably would say, that would be anything other than what your church teaches. So if you're getting a little antsy about what I'm saying, take it up with your church. And I want to say that we're motivated, as I move to my conclusion, I want to say that we're motivated by a sense of love. You know, love which expresses itself as a concern for justice. You know, love is not something that we just claim for ourselves, that we claim that we're doing, you know, sort of upon other people or for other people without too much evidence. Dr. Cornel West said that justice is what love looks like in public. Or as the text says, justice, justice you shall pursue. And at a time when things seem so bad and out of control, the least we can do, the very least we can do is raise our voices. You know, we are not powerless. We have resources, we have privilege, we have position, we have authority. We must not give that away for the sake of comfort or convenience or for a superficial sense of peace. People of faith have a huge role to play, and we have the faith and we have the belief that our actions can meet with success. Not only do we have the right, but we have the duty and the obligation to stand for justice, mercy, and peace. We don't know that we can succeed. We have faith that we can succeed, but we don't know it. There's a famous rabbinic text, which I'll share with you, that we are not required to complete the work, but neither are we free to desist from it. Right? So we have to do what we can, where we can, with what we can. But we know if we don't try, we'll get what we're getting, which is not very good. We can't live like that anymore. So if we join together in this righteous effort, in love and in justice, we may, as Dr. King concluded his talk at Riverside Church over 50 years ago, if we will but make the right choice, we will be able to speed up the day all over America and all over the world, where justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Please join us in this sacred work. Thank you.